Pleased to say I'm joined by a reporter for the Daily Mail, Lettice Bromovsky, and broadcaster and writer, Gemma Forte. Ladies, very good morning to you this Sunday.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. Shall we get started? There's a lot to talk about, isn't there? I'm going to roll my sleeves up. We're going to start with the Sunday Times. And HS2 is in chaos.
It is, and I think we've all known that for a long time, but essentially the new Transport Minister is trying to get a grip on it. And what really struck me is just at a time when we're all being asked to sort of, or told that, or having our belts tightened, that is going to be inflicted upon us, this waste is criminal, really. You are talking billions. So the sentence that really is irritating... she intends to challenge the body over costs and delivery after HS2 was unable to clarify if the latest overspend on the scheme was 10 billion or 20 billion.
Huge difference.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot when you think that our fiscal black hole or whatever is, well, anything between 20 and 40 billion, you know, well, look, right there. HS2. And the idea that Britain can't deliver on infrastructure is really sad as well in 2024. It sort of makes us look rather ridiculous. I mean, if you showed these costs to Germany or Japan or
Italy,
other places that are sort of known for getting their infrastructure built really efficiently and then providing cost-effective transport for their citizens as well. You know, there was another thing I saw the other day. Somebody was saying it would be cheaper to buy an old banger, drive it to Manchester and dump it every time I get the train because it's 350 quid or something to go from London to Manchester. So it's pathetic.
Essentially, at the heart of this, though, are people whose lives, in the very first phase of this, were ripped apart. Homes people had to move out of, community centres, churches. You know, it's things like this that I suppose, beyond the headlines, people are really affected by. HS2.
So, I mean, for me personally, I think the only way this can have a sort of decent ending is to deliver parts of it effectively and improve people's transport.
Yeah, Louise Hay quoted as saying taxpayers have a right to expect HS2 that is delivered efficiently.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, I think that dream is over.
Shall we move on? Shall we talk about the budget?
Yeah, the ongoing
Why
budget.
not? It's been going on for quite some time. Well, we've had quite a few leaks, haven't we? I feel like there won't be very much new in this budget on the 30th. But let us take us away. The Daily Mail covering this today on their front page.
Yeah, so the Daily Mail today have a new poll which is essentially saying that the electorate no longer trust Labour with our money. Now, this poll has found that 23% of voters would now say that the Tories are better equipped to handle their money. And obviously this is just one poll and all polls should be taken with a pinch of salt. But there is a certain message behind this which shows that people are a little bit fed up with the fact that we now, with the speculation around the budget, seem to be arguing over semantics. You know, they said back when it was campaign that they weren't going to increase things like national insurance, but now they're going back and saying, we weren't going to increase it for employees, but we'll do it for employers. And more recently this week, we've seen income tax as well. You know, we won't increase it, but we might now extend it for 2 more years so that the threshold stays the same and 1 million more people go into it. For a lot of the electorate, that's going to be a broken manifesto pledge.
Do you think voters will see it like that? Those who get a pay rise, fiscal dragged into paying higher taxes?
Yeah, fiscal drag is going to, without raising the income tax threshold, which is so long overdue. What I will say is the Mail is using words like horror show budget. It's not out yet, and funny that the Mail calls it that before we've even seen it, you know. And I think the country is a bit tired of talking about things 3 weeks before they happen. The OBR hasn't even given their forecast yet. I think it is all pretty gloomy, and I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying, do we have to talk about it 2-3 weeks because we are governed by the papers deciding that we have to so far in advance before we know the tangible facts?
Because a key to a really good budget is keeping your cards close to your chest and not revealing too much or showing your hand. But I feel like we know so much about it already.
I feel like we know so much about it already. And you mentioned earlier that there are leaks. I think these are strategic leaks, perhaps, from someone very close to Rachel Reeves, to try and get all of this potentially bad press out early on so that when it eventually comes out, finally, hopefully, the papers will have moved on. They can talk maybe about something that's slightly more positive going on in the news at the time.
Well, we'll move on to the Sunday Telegraph. Robert Jenrick has a plan should he become the leader of the Conservative Party and then move into number 10 if that should happen.
Yeah,
Gemma.
I feel like Jenrick has lost the point that Conservative has the word conserve in, like look after things, keep. He wants to tear everything up. It's awful, but it reminds me of Cracker Jack, which is, if you're old like me, you'll remember, it was like, oh, I could rip a tissue. It's just sort of head-bangy words to appeal to the very sort of right of his party, potentially the Reform voters who've lost their faith in the Conservatives. But I think it's coming across as a bit balmy, really.
So what is he not happy with?
He wants to tear up the Climate Change Act. Oh, that's sensible. I mean, in my view, that would be sort of ridiculous. Human Rights Act, obviously, doesn't like human rights. Yeah, I mean, there are huge consequences to ripping these things up, and that's not what he's providing us with, any substance and any of the repercussions.
What I think as well as he's trying to do in this situation is often he is seen as you know, the more centrist compared to Kemi, who's continuously been
he once was,
exactly.
Once upon a time,
and he once was, you know, David Cameron's supporter, whereas Kemi's been a more Brexiteer, more staunch Brexiteer from the start. So I think through this he's overly trying perhaps to appeal to the right of the party. But I think in many ways it's a rather narrow view of once you get past this, if he does win, you have to appeal to the wider electorate. And these policies, this bonfire of things without any real direction of where it's going, isn't necessarily going to appeal to the wider electorate once you think about general elections.
And we've had independent reviews on that note recently, that we are 140 billion worse off because of Brexit. Now, right there, that's 40 billion worth of tax that the government would have that we wouldn't be having to find now with sort of austerity too. And we are so British about it. It's like, oh, let's just not talk about that massive error that we made. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. We're all skint now. Our cost of living has gone up through the roof. Food costs more, and it's been proven that that is a direct consequence of Brexit. When are we going to have a sensible discussion and make lives easier for ourselves and try to fix it by, you know, getting closer again to the single market?
Well, that's not Robert Jenrick's rule book.
No, it
sure.
isn't.
But you make a really interesting point, don't you, about Gemma, about Robert Jenrick appealing to Reform voters. That was a big issue in the general election. We all saw that. But then, is he playing to the members? Is he thinking long term about the public? Where do you think he stands?
I would say he's definitely trying to win back some of those Reform voters, like you say, particularly when he talks about things like the ECHR. That's very much something in their rhetoric that they use a lot. He's trying to win people back from Farage, and he's focusing very much on this election. I don't think he's got any future thought of past this, you know, leadership election.
But it's interesting, he's got to appeal to the Conservative membership who haven't left and gone to Reform. At this stage, he needs to become leader, so I don't understand. I would understand that strategy if he had become leader and then it was like leading up to an election, but at the moment it just seems sort of very bizarre, I think.
Curious. We'll stick with Robert Jenrick, actually. The Sunday Express blame Keir for winter OAP deaths. Lettice, this Sunday Express.
So again, this is Robert Jenrick on another front page, National Today, and he's saying you can blame Keir Starmer for OAP deaths that happen because of the axe in winter fuel payments. I think this language, first of all, is largely unhelpful to this sort of debate, you know, blaming one person for the winter fuel payments. But he is appealing to people who feel very hard done by the axing of the winter fuel payments. You know, in total, the cost of winter fuel payments was 1.4 billion. And he and pensioners will have seen Keir Starmer, give away 10 billion in, you know, increases in wages for certain parts of the industry. I'm not saying those increases were wrong, but it's hard to measure up when people are struggling, when they might not be able to afford it, and they might have just missed that threshold to keep the winter fuel payment, to somehow say that there's a good reason for this.
I mean, there's no doubt it needed to be means-tested somehow, which is, I know, why the Tories never did it. I do think there are many pensioners who are extremely affluent. I saw one guy saying, oh, I used to spend mine on a golf club. I mean, but I agree that the saving compared to the risk of the pensioners who really will suffer, it's not worth it. The optics have been absolutely terrible. It's gone down like a cup of cold sick. And I don't like the Express's language either. I don't like scaring people. I don't like fear-mongering. And I don't like you know, that's a horrible headline. But inevitably, if there is some poor soul who perishes, that is the kind of headline that Keir Starmer is going to be seeing, and no one would want that.
That will stick. And we'll just end on The Sun, reflecting on the death of Liam Payne and his sister's tribute to him, that she says in a heartfelt message on Instagram that she couldn't save him.
Yeah, it was so sad. Poor family. I saw Cheryl Cole, I never know what her surname is, but she came out, obviously, she has a child with Liam. So, yeah, this is a son, a brother, you know, a dad, and it's just tragic. And I think there's been a lot of conjecture about, I don't know, fame and getting fame so young. It's very sad.
Yeah, there's a tribute later in London to pay respects to Liam by fans. That's all for us for now. Do stay with us.